One morning, he was the richest man in the East. By evening, he had nothing. His wealth suddenly wiped out. His servants taken from him. His children, all 10 of them, claimed by a devastating disaster. And then, as if that was not enough, his own health failed, leaving him in unimaginable physical pain. His wife told him to give up on God entirely. His friends accused him of secret sin. And God, the God he had served faithfully his entire life, remained silent for what felt like an eternity. This is the story of Job, the man who lost everything except his faith, who demanded answers from heaven and received something far greater, who discovered that sometimes God does not explain our suffering because he offers us something better than explanation. He offers us himself. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. The name means persecuted or hated, which would prove tragically prophetic. But when we first meet him, Job was anything but persecuted. He was blessed beyond measure. And that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. Blameless. The Hebrew word suggests completeness, integrity, wholeness. Job was not sinless, but he was sincere. His worship was genuine. His character was consistent. What he appeared to be publicly, he was privately. He feared God, which in Scripture means reverent submission to the Almighty. He turned away from evil, actively avoiding anything that would dishonor his Creator. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, and very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. 7 sons, the number of completion, 3 daughters, thousands of animals, countless servants. Job was not merely wealthy, he was the greatest of all the people of the East. In that ancient world, he stood at the pinnacle of human prosperity. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. Job was a devoted father. After each celebration, he rose early to offer sacrifices for his children. He prayed for them individually. He worried about their souls. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." He could not control their hearts, but he could intercede for them. He could not guarantee their faithfulness, but he could cover them with prayer. Thus Job did continually. And then the scene shifted to a place Job knew nothing about. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The heavenly council assembled. Angels stood before the throne of God to give account of their activities. And among them, uninvited but undeterred, came Satan. The name means accuser or adversary. He is the ancient serpent, the enemy of God and humanity, the one who prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. He had been observing Earth, watching, waiting, looking for opportunities. The Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." He was roaming, restless, searching, and God drew his attention to a specific target. And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, who fears God and turns away from evil. God initiated this conversation. God pointed to Job. God praised his servant in the presence of the accuser. It was almost as if God was inviting the challenge. Satan's response revealed his cynical view of all worship. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land." The accusation was devastating in its implications. Job serves you because you pay him to serve you. His worship is a transaction, not devotion. He loves your gifts, not you. Remove the benefits, and you will see his true heart. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. Curse you to your face, the ultimate blasphemy. Satan believed that every human being had a breaking point, a price at which their faith would crumble. Remove enough blessings, and the mask of piety would fall away to reveal the selfishness underneath. And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand." Permission granted. God allowed Satan to attack everything Job possessed. His livestock, his servants, his children, all were suddenly vulnerable. The hedge of protection was lowered. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. The attack came with terrifying speed. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And there came a messenger to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing, and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Sabaeans fell upon them, and took them, and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." Raiders from the south, 500 oxen, 500 donkeys, gone. Servants murdered. The first blow had fallen. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, "The fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you." Fire from heaven. 7,000 sheep incinerated. More servants dead. The second blow fell before Job could process the first. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels, and took them, and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." Raiders from the north. 3,000 camels stolen. Still more servants slaughtered. The third blow compounded the horror. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, "Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house. And it fell upon the young people, and they are dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you." All 10 children dead, crushed under rubble, gone in an instant. By the way, if you find any of these videos interesting or enjoyable, please consider subscribing. These take a long time to make, and it really helps out. In a single day, Job lost everything except his life and his wife. The greatest man in the East became a man with nothing. Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. He worshipped. In the ashes of his shattered life, covered in the dust of grief, Job fell before God, not to curse, but to worship. And he said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." No bitterness, no accusation, no demanding to know why. Job acknowledged that everything he had possessed was a gift. The giver had the right to reclaim what he had given. Even in loss, Job blessed the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. Satan's prediction had failed. Job had not cursed God. The first test was passed. But Satan was not finished. Again there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. The same scene repeated. The heavenly council, the adversary, the divine question. And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, who fears God and turns away from evil? He still holds fast his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without reason." God acknowledged what had happened. He had allowed the attack. Job had been destroyed without reason, at least without any reason Job could have understood. And still, Job held fast his integrity. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Skin for skin, all that a man has he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face." Satan raised the stakes. Property and family were one thing. Personal suffering was another. Make Job hurt in his own body, and the cursing would come. And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, he is in your hand. Only spare his life." The second permission was granted. Satan could attack Job's body, but not kill him. The hedge lowered further. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with loathsome sores from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Every inch of Job's body erupted in painful, oozing boils. Later descriptions suggest the symptoms were horrific: blackened skin, constant itching, sleeplessness, disfigurement so severe that friends could not recognize him, breath so foul that even his wife was repulsed. And he took a piece of broken pottery with which to scrape himself while he sat in the ashes. The greatest man in the East now sat in an ash heap outside the city, scraping pus from his wounds with a shard of pottery. The transformation was complete. Everything was gone. Only pain remained. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die." She had lost everything too: her children, her home, her social standing, her husband's health. The man she married was unrecognizable, and she saw no point in prolonged suffering. End it. Curse God and let him strike you dead. At least the pain would stop. But he said to her, "You speak as one of the foolish women would speak. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil?" Job refused. If God was God when the blessings flowed, he was still God when the suffering came. If worship was appropriate in prosperity, it was still appropriate in poverty. Job would not abandon his integrity. In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. The second test was passed, but the ordeal was far from over. Now, when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that had come upon him, they came each from his own place: Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They made an appointment together to come to show him sympathy and comfort him. 3 friends traveled to be with Job. Their intentions were good. They wanted to comfort him, to support him, to help him through the darkest valley. And when they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him. The disease had so ravaged his appearance that his closest friends could not identify him. The shock must have been overwhelming, and they raised their voices and wept, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads toward heaven. They mourned with him. They identified with his grief. They performed the ancient rituals of lamentation, and they sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. 7 days of silence. For an entire week they simply sat with Job in his ashes, saying nothing, weeping with him, sharing his pain. This was the best thing they ever did for him. If only they had remained silent. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. Let the day perish on which I was born, and the night that said, a man is conceived. Job did not curse God, but he cursed his existence. He wished he had never been born. He longed for death as a release from suffering. His faith remained, but his anguish was overwhelming. Why did I not die at birth, come out from the womb and expire? Why is light given to him who is in misery, and life to the bitter in soul, who long for death, but it comes not? The question that has echoed through every hospital ward, every funeral home, every dark night of the soul. Why? Why does God allow unbearable suffering to continue? Why does death not come when death would be mercy? Job's lament opened the floodgates. His friends, who had been silent for 7 days, now began to speak. And their words, meant as comfort, became a second torture. Eliphaz spoke first. Remember, who that was innocent ever perished? Or where were the upright cut off? As I have seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. His theology was simple. The innocent do not perish. The upright are not cut off. Therefore, if Job was suffering, Job must have sinned. The suffering was punishment. The solution was repentance. Behold, blessed is the one whom God reproves. Therefore, despise not the discipline of the Almighty. Eliphaz meant well, but his theology was wrong. He assumed that all suffering was discipline, that prosperity proved righteousness, and adversity proved sin. He could not imagine innocent suffering. Bildad was harsher. Does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right? If your children have sinned against him, he has delivered them into the hand of their transgression. Bildad blamed Job's dead children. They must have sinned. Their death was their own fault. And if Job would only seek God properly, restoration would come. If you are pure and upright, surely then he will rouse himself for you and restore your rightful habitation. The logic was cruel in its simplicity. You are suffering because you are not pure. Become pure, and the suffering will stop. Zophar was cruelest of all. Know then that God exacts of you less than your guilt deserves. You deserve worse than what you are getting. Your suffering is actually mercy. If God gave you what you truly deserved, you would be annihilated. Can you find out the deep things of God? Can you find out the limit of the Almighty? Zophar accused Job of arrogance for questioning God. He demanded that Job confess the hidden sins that must have caused this catastrophe. If iniquity is in your hand, put it far away, and let not injustice dwell in your tents. Confess, repent, change, and everything will be fine. The cycle repeated 3 times. Each friend spoke. Job responded. The arguments grew more heated. The accusations became more pointed. Job's friends became his tormentors, and Job maintained his innocence throughout. Till I die, I will not put away my integrity from me. I hold fast my righteousness and will not let it go. My heart does not reproach me for any of my days. He knew he was not perfect, but he also knew he had not committed sins that would deserve this level of punishment. The transactional theology of his friends did not match his experience. He had served God faithfully, yet he was suffering catastrophically. Oh, that I had one to hear me. Here is my signature. Let the Almighty answer me. Job demanded a hearing. He wanted his day in court. He wanted God himself to explain why an innocent man was being crushed. But God remained silent. Then a 4th voice entered the conversation. Elihu, a younger man who had waited respectfully for his elders to finish, could contain himself no longer. I am young in years, and you are aged. Therefore I was timid and afraid to declare my opinion to you. But it is the spirit in man, the breath of the Almighty, that makes him understand. It is not the old who are wise, nor the aged who understand what is right. Elihu offered a different perspective. He did not accuse Job of hidden sin. Instead, he suggested that suffering could be educational, that God might use pain to prevent greater disaster, that affliction could be grace in disguise. He delivers the afflicted by their affliction and opens their ear by adversity. Elihu pointed toward something Job's other friends had missed. Suffering might have a purpose beyond punishment. God might be doing something Job could not yet see. Behold, God is great, and we know him not. The number of his years is unsearchable. Some mysteries were beyond human comprehension. Some divine purposes were hidden from human sight. The proper response was not accusation, but humility. But even Elihu could not fully answer Job's questions. Only God could do that. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. After 37 chapters of human debate, God finally spoke. But his answer was not what anyone expected. Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? God did not explain why Job had suffered. He did not reveal the heavenly counsel where Satan had challenged Job's integrity. He did not tell Job about the cosmic drama in which he was the central figure. Instead, God asked questions. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? Have you commanded the morning since your days began, and caused the dawn to know its place? Have you entered into the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you, or have you seen the gates of deep darkness? Question after question, God confronted Job with the vastness of creation and the limitations of human understanding. The earth's foundations, the storehouses of snow, the channels of rain, the constellations of heaven, the behavior of wild animals, the flight of eagles, the strength of horses. Where were you, Job? Do you understand these things? Can you control them? Shall a fault finder contend with the Almighty? He who argues with God, let him answer it. Job had demanded answers. God demanded humility. Then Job answered the Lord and said, Behold, I am of small account. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand on my mouth. I have spoken once, and I will not answer. Twice, but I will proceed no further. Job fell silent. The man who had argued for chapters suddenly had nothing to say. But God was not finished. He spoke again from the whirlwind, describing two great creatures, Behemoth and Leviathan, beasts of terrifying power that no human could control. Behold, Behemoth, which I made as I made you. Can you draw out Leviathan with a fishhook? Will he make a covenant with you? Will he speak to you soft words? If Job could not control these creatures, how could he presume to understand the purposes of their Creator? The message was clear. God's ways were beyond human comprehension. His purposes were larger than any single human life. The universe did not revolve around Job's comfort. There were dimensions of reality that Job could not see, battles being fought in realms he did not know existed. And sometimes, the right response to suffering was not understanding, but trust. Then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Job's perspective had shifted. He was no longer demanding explanations. He was acknowledging mystery. He was recognizing that some things were beyond his comprehension. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. This was the transformation. Before the suffering, Job had known about God. After the suffering, Job knew God. The second-hand faith of prosperity had become the first-hand encounter of the whirlwind. Job had met the Almighty face to face. He repented, not of hidden sins that had caused his suffering, but of presumption, of speaking without knowledge, of thinking he could comprehend the ways of the infinite. And then came restoration. After the Lord had spoken these words to Job, the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, My anger burns against you and against your two friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. The friends who had accused Job were themselves condemned. Their neat theology had been wrong. Their assumptions had been false. Job, for all his complaints and questions, had spoken rightly. He had wrestled with God honestly, rather than defending God dishonestly. Now therefore, take 7 bulls and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer up a burnt offering for yourselves. And my servant Job shall pray for you, for I will accept his prayer, not to deal with you according to your folly. Job prayed for the friends who had tormented him. The man who had lost everything became the intercessor for those who had added to his pain. Grace was already at work in his heart, and the Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he had prayed for his friends. And the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. 14,000 sheep instead of 7,000, 6,000 camels instead of 3,000, 1,000 yoke of oxen instead of 500, 1,000 female donkeys instead of 500, double everything. And he had 7 sons and 3 daughters, the same number of children as before. Some wonder why not double. But children are not livestock. You do not replace children, you add to them. Job's first 10 children were not lost. They were with God. His new 10 children joined a family that now numbered 20. His daughters were the most beautiful women in all the land. Job gave them an inheritance alongside their brothers, an unusual act of generosity in that culture. And after this, Job lived 140 years and saw his sons and his sons' sons, 4 generations. And Job died an old man and full of days. The story ended in blessing, but the blessing was not the point. The point was what happened in the middle. The point was what Job learned in the ash heap. The point was the encounter with God that suffering made possible. Job never learned why he had suffered. The book never tells us that God explained the heavenly counsel to him. He went to his grave without knowing about Satan's challenge or God's confidence in his integrity. The explanation was withheld. What was given instead was presence. God himself showed up. God spoke. God revealed his power and wisdom. God invited Job into a relationship deeper than any Job had known before. Sometimes God does not answer our why. Sometimes he answers with himself. The story of Job points forward to Christ in profound ways. Job was an innocent sufferer. Jesus was the only truly innocent sufferer. Job lost everything and was eventually restored. Jesus lost his life and was raised to glory. Job interceded for his friends who had wronged him. Jesus intercedes for sinners who crucified him. Job cried out, "I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been thus destroyed, yet in my flesh I shall see God." He spoke more than he knew. The Redeemer does live. He has stood upon the earth. And because of him, we too shall see God in our flesh, raised from the dead, restored beyond imagination. The suffering you face may never be explained in this life. Like Job, you may never know why you lost what you lost, why you hurt as you hurt, why God allowed what he allowed. But you can know the one who allowed it. You can meet him in the whirlwind. You can hear his voice and see his face. You can move from knowing about him to knowing him. That is what suffering can do. It can strip away everything until only God remains. And when only God remains, you discover that God is enough. Job's friends offered explanations. God offered himself. The explanation would not have healed Job's wounds, but the presence of God transformed his soul. Perhaps you are sitting in your own ash heap today. Perhaps you have lost what you thought you could never lose. Perhaps friends have failed you. Health has abandoned you. Answers have eluded you. Look up. The same God who spoke from the whirlwind still speaks. The same Redeemer who Job glimpsed from afar has now been revealed in full. His name is Jesus. He has suffered more than you ever will. He understands your pain, and he offers not explanations, but himself. That is enough.